Now that all of our machining is complete on our engine block, we're going to head into our cleaning area. I just wanted to go over a couple things on how important it is to make sure every component of the engine is completely clean. We'll spend a lot of time on the block cleaning it. Since it's been shot blasted and everything, we want to make absolutely sure that we get everything cleaned out. Every oil galley will be brushed. Every threaded hole, everything will be thoroughly cleaned. Okay, now that our engine block is cleaned and painted, the next thing we'll do is we'll install all of our freeze plugs in it, our oil galley plugs. The few things that we'll need to do before we can start the assembly process is we'll check our ring gap on all of our rings, and then I'll flip it over and I'll install the main caps with the bearings in them one more time, and we'll get a measurement to see what our exact main bearing clearance will be. Okay, we have all the parts laid out. Everything's been cleaned and prepared to install in the engine. Basically in order as we're going to install it, from our crankshaft, rods and pistons. We'll put the rings on them. Our front cover, rear main housing, timing chain kit, and our stage 2 cylinder head with the rocker assembly. Okay, what we're doing now is we're getting a main bearing clearance. What we do here is we use a dial bore gauge and a micrometer. We actually will take and measure the journal on the crankshaft, and then what we'll do is we'll set our dial bore gauge to where it'll read 0, and then what we'll do is we'll go to our engine block and we'll actually bore gauge with the bearing installed with the cap torqued down. And this will give us an exact measurement of what we have for clearance between the crankshaft and the main bearing. And we'll do this for all 5 journals on our block. We'll document the numbers, and then we're pretty much going to be ready to set the crank in it. Okay, now we're ready to set the crankshaft in our block. Everything's been cleaned, measured, we're prepped as far as we can prep it. It's time to start assembling. The first thing we'll do is set our thrust washers in. You can see the grooves, those are going to go to the outside. I put a little bit of assembly lube on the block just to kind of hold the bearings in place. A little bit of assembly lube on there, on the outsides of the thrust washers. Now you can do assembly lube or engine oil. I'm doing engine oil because I want to make sure the crank feels good when I turn it for the first time, and we're going to be starting this engine pretty much right away. Once we get it assembled, it's not going to sit for a long period of time. If it was going to sit, we would put assembly lube on the bearings also. Very carefully. Now we don't want to turn it yet until we get the center cap on, because we don't want to spin our thrust washers out. Start with our center main cap. Get it set in place. I have my bolts ready. A little bit of engine oil on the thread and around the cap. That helps you get a proper torque reading. Make sure your arrow's pointed forward. We'll set our torque wrench. Now what we want to do is get it tight, and we need to seat the thrust washers. So what you do is you just get it snug, and you're going to actually wrap with a rubber mallet. And that one feels good. And what we'll do now is we'll put a dial indicator, a magnetic based dial indicator actually, off of it, and we'll measure our thrust clearance on it. Okay, now we've set the thrust in it, and we have a dial indicator set up on the end of the crankshaft so we can get a measurement on what we have here and make sure it's in factory spec. We're showing around 4 thousandths, which is good. Sometimes it takes a little bit to get those seated in, especially if you use assembly lube on it, because it just makes it thicker and it doesn't get as accurate of a reading. So now we're ready to put the rest of our caps on and torque them down. And as you can see, with the center main torqued, it spins really easy. All right, crank's in, and it spins perfect. Okay, we're now ready to install our piston and rod setup into our stage 2 stroker engine build. Oil a bearing, a little bit of oil on the piston skirts. Make sure our rings are aligned where we want them. Now we're ready to put the caps on. Make sure we get the tangs lined up. ARP moly lube on the bolts. And we'll torque the caps down, and that'll complete our rotating assembly.